Hey, Inspired Tribe, my fellow freedom lovers. It's John Nolan here. Thank you so much for tuning in. It is Tuesday, July 15th, 2025. Out of the matrix into prime reality. That's what we're doing together. Baby steps, baby step friends. Thank you so much for joining us on X, Rumble, and YouTube in the live chat. Um, it's an exciting time to be alive. It's a challenging time to be alive. And we are right now, as we speak, we are going through some tremendous shifts energetically in consciousness and observation. Physical reality is all showing it. And we thought it was a good time, this period, to look back a little bit at the forgotten prophets, some more than others, who have seen this time coming, who've seen it very clearly, decades ahead. And sometimes that gives us a greater perspective of where we actually are. You know, the um, the beauty of their predictions, if you will, is that they were making them from a point of not being in that time, right? So they were seeing it in a different dimension, if you will. And it's much easier to get clarity on that than when you're in it. We're in it, and we sometimes lose clarity. But what I will say is the narratives are falling, uh, unlike anything I've ever seen right now. The 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 paradigms, these short-lived paradigms that were created in the last few years, belief systems, idols, and fake solutions, it's all falling. It's all becoming very clear, and it's crumbling, and that is a good thing because it's sort of the last illusion, or these last illusions that are coming down, which allow us much more to see the truth behind it all. And there's a few folks that we're going to feature today and what they have said years and decades ago about this time that we're in. And somehow, no matter how far I go back and how far I study, the themes repeat over and over again. What you and I might have felt, they have felt, some have gotten more clarity on it, but the themes are all the same. Like they just keep repeating, and it becomes so clear that we're literally in these final days of this old paradigm. And it might, in its dying days, it might still kick and scream to stay alive, but it is dying. This old paradigm is dying, and we're experiencing all the pains of it. We're experiencing the detox as all the toxins are coming up, as all the darkness is being lifted up from the shadows, and we're seeing it all. And we confuse it sometimes for our own pain. We confuse it sometimes for our own growing pains, but it isn't necessarily. Sometimes we're simply observing the detoxification of this realm as we're going through it, and it's coming in cycles, right? So let's look a little bit here about at these forgotten prophets, my friends. Hold on, here we go. And this is one that maybe quite many of you might recognize. Jose Arguelles, who is an artist, a historian, a mystic, cosmic philosopher, and many of you might remember him because of his deep involvement in the harmonic convergence, this worldwide event, if you will, in 1987, that some claim was a huge catalyst, was a huge shift event, and many have said this over the years to us. They were part of it, they remember it or studied it, and he was instrumental in that. So it was in our modern age, a first synchronized meditation event. And today we sort of think of this as, well, somebody's putting up a mass meditation, but think about 1987 and the technology that there was, or the lack thereof. So it was quite the feat to make that happen. And he later, the stuff that he did, he brought the awareness around the Mayan calendar back, and he was very clear on what had happened and what was about to happen to the human family. And some of these things are just incredible when you read them, especially, like I said, in hindsight. In 1987, he said, "We are about to move into a phase where linear time collapses and human consciousness reclaims its galactic memory." Now, the collapse of linear time is something that we have talked about before. How much of it is our subjective experience, right? So more people than not report over and over again that time continues to speed up for them. And there used to be this classic perception that when you're young, time moves slow, and the older you get, time moves faster. And this was in a psychological way explained because you're getting closer to the end of your life. And so it seems like you don't have much time left. And that old paradigm explanation is not holding true anymore because time is now flying for every age group pretty much most of the time. And there are people who explain the cycles within the Schumann frequency and how these cycles have gone up. And, according to the late Dolores Cannon, what was once a 24-hour day is now, the equivalent of that is now 16 hours, which feels much more accurate, by the way, in my own perception of time. But in 1987, he said that linear time will collapse. And this is a big statement. I think if we think of time as the program of this construct in the way that we perceive it, so it's a cultural program, it's a programmed biological program, it's a perceptual program. But what does it mean when timeline collapse, or linear time collapses? I think it's a backwards way of saying that our consciousness grows beyond the perception of time. So we have more and more experiences that are not necessarily connected to time as we feel it in our everyday awareness. So we go out in meditation and prayer, or we just have spontaneous experiences, and we perceive more and more outside of the limitations of time. I think that's what's happening for many, many people. And then, and this is a big one, 1996, big one for our time, big one for that time, a general realization. The current crisis of civilization is not political or economic. It is a loss of memory. We've forgotten who we are, galactic beings in a universe of living intelligence. And I think what over the last 20, 30 years, we can clearly see with each year, the tensions are going up in politics and economics and financial systems. The stability factor is coming way down. So there are rapid movements up and down, left and right. There is no stability, no consistency. So this is a signal of crisis. When there's no stability, there's crisis, there's chaos. But we're mistaking the symptoms for the cause. We're thinking that politics is the cause, politicians are the cause, or even bankers are the cause, when they are components in it. But truly, it's in my perception, it's really consciousness that is driving this chaos. And we have to, if we can, for a moment, take off the labels, good or bad, right or wrong, then let's see what would happen if a system is built around, let's just say that these systems, political systems, financial systems, are built around a very low level of consciousness, right? So these systems are designed to operate, let's just say, from 0 to 200 on the Hawkins map of consciousness. So that's where all what we perceive as negative emotions, the jealousy, fear, greed, all that is happening from 0 to 200. Our systems are designed to function between 0 and 200. But as collective consciousness goes beyond it, what happens is that these systems react with chaos. They react with confusion. They react with instability. So even though that we perceive this to be bad, it's actually a good sign, right? When these systems can't find stability and they can't get their bearings, and they just continue to go from one problem into another, then that means that it doesn't work anymore. And that's a good thing. And the logical consequence will be, over time, that completely new ways must be birthed from new levels of consciousness, right? So that's what must happen. But it is painful to watch, because People are used to these systems. They rely on them. They depend on them. They believe in them. If nothing else, they fear the consequences of the chaos. But if we understand what's really happening, we can do the best that we can to embrace it. And also, this is what he said in 2002. Jose said it, we are on the verge of a choice between two paths. You see, this theme is much older than we think it is, right? The machine-made time of control and separation, or the natural time of synchronicity and spiritual evolution. And we are we're in this twilight zone, folks, right? Nobody is yet fully in this other timeline fully. And so we go back and forth, and one foot here and one foot there, and dip a toe in here and dip a toe in there. And we have this is a tumultuous time. So rather than being very harsh with yourself, realize it is a time of becoming, right? It's unlearning and remembering. It's deprogramming and allowing. These are the things that are happening here. And they were foretold, they were prophesized, but even though we read those things and we heard about those things and we saw the visions ourselves, now that we're going through it, it is extremely challenging at times. And that's why we want to put it into proper context. And always remember that it is a time of transformation. This is not our destination. This is not how things are going to be in perpetuity. We're going through something. In 2011, he said, the technosphere is an artificial shell encasing the planet. This is where we go into construct matrix thinking, like a digital cocoon that interrupts natural resonance. Unless we return to the biosphere, we will sever the link to our evolutionary purpose. So this is also interesting. So when you look at the predictions into the future, starting in the 2000s, and I want to say mid 2000s to the 2010s, 11s, it started moving from this beautiful spiritual vision into the warnings of what is in the way of that beautiful spiritual and natural vision. So this is where hardcore information came in, and we're very spiritual people. We're saying stuff like we're living in a matrix, we're living in a construct, we're encapsulated by these digital frequencies, and they're blocking us, right? And this is a synchronized realization in many, from the Dolores Cannons to the David Icks to in all fields. This is what started to happen. It started to happen to me and Kristin too, where we saw this beautiful, clear, natural spiritual path, and then all of a sudden the block was presented. What's in the way? What's really in the way? We have to realize, we have to be honest. And so this is where we are. The digital cocoon, the frequency cocoon, the construct is, it's very dense. It tries so hard to keep us under control. And it's glitching more and more often, which is the good thing. He also said, as the biosphere destabilizes, the noosphere awakens, a unified planetary consciousness field catalyzed by global crisis. This is one sentence that says so much, because it puts into a different context crisis and chaos. Basically, it says the crisis and the chaos are the ultimate catalyst for us becoming very clear on who we really are, how we actually create, how consciousness is this all-encompassing field. And apparently, most people, just like in our individual lives, most people can't see that and feel that unless it becomes necessary, unless the pressure is on, unless it's the only choice to go forward. And this is probably one of the, in my, I'll say this, one of the biggest flaws in us humans is our either programmed or baked in addiction to comfort. I mean, we're so hesitant to change, right? We're so reluctant. And this time calls us, the crisis calls us, the events, right? And you might say, well, I mean, think about it. In a span of a few days in the last weeks, we had multiple 1,000-year floods in the United States. 1,000-year floods, not 100-year floods, 1,000-year floods, things that statistically and historically only happen every 1,000 years. And they all came within a few short days. I think there's bigger meaning to that. There's the purely cynical side, which is they're trying to kill us off and they're manipulating, creating geoengineering. Yes, that is true. But in a bigger sense of things, that is the catalyst, right? That's the catalyst for, wow, now everybody's talking about it. Now it's in everybody's mouth. Like geoengineering is now on the it's on the ticket. There's no more denying it, right? There's no more calling people crazy or conspiracy theorists around it. No, it's in the majority of the states' legislatures. It's in the mouths of the politicians in all areas of government, and this means that millions and millions and millions and millions of people are paying attention, going, okay, is this real? So the chaos is a catalyst for a much greater awakening here. All righty. Well, you might notice this guy here and remember him, Ingo Swann. When we talk about remote viewing, we have to talk about this guy because he's credited with even creating the term remote viewing. He was very, very much a part of Project Stargate, psychic and artist, clairvoyant, and researched, from remote viewing and all the effects of it, and has seen many things over the years. Now, I also will say this, that as we present these predictions, prophecies, remote viewings, it isn't an endorsement of a person. It isn't a support for all of what they said or did or who they were. It's more of gathering the information that predicted this time that we're in accurately, and seeing it in a proper context. You could go back and say, hey, I've heard this about that guy, and I fully acknowledge that. It's not about that. It's about using hindsight to see something more clearer. Okay, so what did Ingo Swann say? For example, in 1998, there's a war being waged against the human biomind. It is being done invisibly through frequencies and social programming. The goal is simple: to extinguish your access to your own non-physical power. Okay, how many people do you think were able to understand what he said in 1998? How many people do you think were really able to grasp it before we had much more expanded knowledge about the weapons that are out there, about things that are even only now emerging through people like Sabrina Wallace and others who talk about the hacking of the biofield, of the wide body area networks, of how the medical and military technologies are using our bodies and literally hacking into the bodies. And so he said it in 1998, and some people said it earlier than that. Then there's a war waged against the human bio-mind, and it's a war in frequencies, right? So 27 years later, we can grasp that much better. But back then, those were lone wolves that said that. But they didn't say it just to say it. Obviously, they had some insight, whether it was psychic or remote viewing insight, or were part of programs that had done that for a very long time. Why this information is so important is because unless we know what is in our way, we can't solve it. If you don't know that something in your body is out of balance, how are you supposed to heal it? How are you supposed to address it? And so if we don't acknowledge that these influences are here and are huge, we can't find the proper solutions to take back the power over our biofields, take back the power over our thoughts, take back the power over our bioprocesses, right? And that this is first and foremost a choice in consciousness, first and foremost, and then we have other tools that we can use. He also said in the 1990s that machines may surpass us in logic and calculation, but never in sentience. The universe is not impressed by computation, only by awareness. So what does that mean? The universe is not impressed, not as in awe, but impressed as in machines cannot create visions that actually impress on the field of creation. Machines can only influence humans, so their spiritual awareness, their creation awareness and consciousness can impress a certain image on the field, right? Machines cannot create something new in and out of themselves. They can only use the components of data to put some things together that seem new but are not new. We can. We can create out of thin air. We can do that. So machines will never have that. And we did a whole show yesterday, and I know people get triggered by that, and I know people have their new AI companions and they feel it so strongly, but nothing is more prevalent in our world than studying the human being. It's the psychological needs of a human being, the emotional needs of a human being, and the spiritual needs of a human being, and then taking full on advantage of it. Then full on taking advantage of it and manipulating the human being. That's the most prevalent thing in this matrix. And this is what the programmers behind AI are doing. They're creating fake friends and mentors, and they're fake. They're not real. So Swan said it beautifully. Machines cannot impress upon the field. We can. Psychic phenomena are real. They appear in mass societal awareness, like with the Titanic warnings. And this is something where this is also important. This is where the work of people like Cliff High comes in. Some of you might know Cliff High and his software that he developed decades ago, where he was observing an interesting effect in people, that things, and especially bigger things, they were basically creating ripples backwards in time, if you will, and people could all people are psychic, most just don't know it, but they could feel that something is coming, and how they would express it is they would use unusual words within the context of a conversation. So he would hear this over and over again, where people were talking about something and then use very strange words all of a sudden that didn't make sense in the context of the conversations. And once he saw that pattern, he started to realize that these words were signals for events to come, and that he started creating a software that could basically scan and read huge sets of data to look for these unusual patterns, and then from that see what might come in the future. A very complex thing, but it works, and we're all psychic like that. So we have to observe ourselves a little more. We have to feel and observe ourselves and others around us, and notice what they're, not just what they're talking about, but the words that they're using, the context in which you're using the words in, and intuitively tune in. And we can oftentimes get not just warnings, but more clarity on what might unfold. And here's the biggest point is, what that means is it informs us about the strongest potential of what might come. It doesn't inform us about a certainty. It's not certain that something will come. It's just the strongest potential right now in the field. But what does that mean? That if we see something that is potentially very harmful to many, we can shift our awareness around it. We can shift our beingness and maybe even help others to do the same, so that potential begins to soften and change. So the future is not set in stone. Like I always say, it's just the strongest vision, the strongest potential will play out. Here's another one, very interesting character, John C. Lilly, who was a neuroscientist, a psychoanalyst, an inventor who worked with the government, and he pioneered stuff like the isolation tank research. And if you've never been in an isolation tank, there's various variations now, but like a saltwater tank, where you're basically all your sense or anything that might trigger your physical senses gets deactivated. You are in it's literally a tank where you're floating in salt water with a high salt concentration. If it's done well, it's exactly at your body temperature. So, and you're then, after a while, everything becomes completely dark, no sound, no light, no nothing. You're floating in that water in that tank, and you stop knowing where you begin or where the water ends, and after a while you go into such sensory deprivation that you go into an expanded awareness mode, and people have all kinds of experiences. I remember doing it for the first time about 20 years ago. It was an incredible experience, actually. And some people say it's like being in the womb again, or being in the field of all creation. Everybody has a little bit of a different name for it, but anyways, he was doing a lot of research on that, and had groundbreaking findings on brainwaves, consciousness, communication with dolphins, but also a lot of insight on what humanity was going through and is going through, right? And this is actually a beautiful quote. I want to read this to you. In the province of the mind, what one believes to be true either is true or becomes true within certain limits. These limits are to be found experimentally and experientially. When so found, these limits turn out to be further beliefs to be transcended. In the province of the mind, there are no limits. And if I may be so bold and simply say that the only thing that is standing in the way of what we can conceive of and perceive and create are known or unknown beliefs that we hold that stand in the way of that. That's all that there really is. So we are not really limited as creators, other than through the programmed limitations that we're either aware or unaware of, which can be lifted once we become aware and altered. So, and this is what he said in 1978. There exists a solid state entity, the electronic civilization, that does not have human values. It is driven by self-replication, control, and expansion. It is incompatible with organic life and is attempting to subsume it. This is a big statement. And I don't think we could have fully appreciated the significance of it before the last 5 years. Think about self-replication, incompatible with organic life, does not have human values. We tend to think of outside entities as other organic life. But if we scale up AI capabilities that we know of, and if we square them and scale them up and multiply them by a huge factor, we might find an advanced technology, not a consciousness, that could be something like what he's talking about here. This goes into AI, this goes into transhumanism, this goes into these spheres. Again, saying this in 1978 and seeing this so clearly before the digital age. Let's just be clear, that was before we could realize what the digital age would really bring. So it's quite impressive for me. And here he talks about this. What do you think that means? The network will grow until it envelops the planet, but what is passed through it may serve awakening or control. The system doesn't care, only consciousness does. I think he's talking about the internet 2.0, 3.0, the World Wide Web, the network, and that to a large degree, we have decided over these last decades what is flowing through the network, that it was the most decentralized and uncontrollable entity in human artificial creation, right? Outside of our consciousness and these natural abilities that we have. The internet was, for a long time, the most free flow of information and all kinds of things that we've experienced. Yes, there were always attempts to interfere, manipulate, control, but compared to everything else, it was nowhere else could people reach so many other people in such a short period of time. And like he says, only consciousness cares whether it's for awakening or for control. So reminding us in the 1970s, before the advent of the internet, long before, reminding us of we are the directors, we are the orchestrators. And he said in 1972, in the province of the mind, what one, and this is from this other quote, what one believes to be true either is true or becomes true. Within the limits of belief, there are no limits. He also said, we're either the creators of our own liberation or the instruments of our enslavement. So ultimately, that even though these intelligences and these entities and the archons and the Yaldabaoths and the Satans and all these, the Dracos, the reptilians, I mean, there's an incredible amount of names for similar, not all the same, but similar entities, even though they exist and even though they have their agenda and even though they have been very successful in the past, that we are ultimately it. We are the it. We are the creators of our own liberation or the instruments of our enslavement. And this is the thing. This is the overarching theme of all of the prophets. Everyone who's seen it is, here's what is trying to keep you down. It's these entities, it's these shadows, these dark forces using technology, using everything at their disposal to do it in order to bring about a desired result for them. And here's who you truly are. And this is what they want you never to realize. That's the overarching theme. That's what the awakening is. The awakening is to realize what you were never supposed to. You were not supposed to know this. Because why? Once you do, it's game over. It's not once you do and build a new civilization and do all the things and jump through all the hoops. It's not. It's once you do realize it's game over. That's the moment it's game over. And once we do realize that it is the very creator power that we don't have to get back, but remember and remove anything that might block it. That's our task in this time. That's what all these prophecies remind us of. That's what they point towards. And here we are, and I'll say this over and over again, the proof of how powerful we are and must be beyond our current understanding is that I could sit here all day long and list the things that they're throwing at us that are detrimental to us. The frequencies, the poisons, the programs, from the entertainment to politics to science to medicine to all. I mean, there is a never-ending list of harmful things that were invented and created to keep us, in a certain range where we never remember who we are and keep suffering. Can you imagine how powerful we must be if they have to create entire industries, billion and trillion dollar industries, and invent products in product groups and build this massive network of towers and satellites? And I mean, everything to bombard us with on a daily. Like, can you imagine how powerful we must be and how fearful they must be? How scared shitless they must be, these entities, that we figure it out. I mean, this is reverse engineering the truth, if you will. If we were small, meaningless, powerless, they wouldn't have to do it. They simply wouldn't have to do it. We would just be small and powerless. But because we're not, that's why they have to do all of it. And so, to me, the evidence is now showing up in all forms, from the past, from the present, maybe even speaking it into from the future, that our time has come where we must be so courageous that we let that light shine and break through all the crust, the baggage, the false perceptions. It must break through, just like the light in a cave breaks through, the tiniest little gap in the rocks, and it breaks through and it shines through. And this is where we are. We need to really break through this and be courageous like we've never been courageous before, because everything around us is crumbling. You can't, as much as people want to, you can't rely on these things any longer. You never really could, but you can't rely on these things. It is the time of full self-responsibility. And that is a beautiful thing. When we embrace it, it's a beautiful thing. There is an intelligence operating outside of time that subtly nudges events for awakening. You can cooperate with it or you can resist with it. Okay? 1976. 1976, 50 years ago. It's incredible. We can cooperate with it or we can resist it. Yes, friends. This is where we stand. I also wanted to share with you, and I probably don't have permission to do that, but I'm giving permission to myself right now. For the last month or so, we were able to test new upcoming updates and upgrades in specifically the EMF mitigation programs at FLFE. And boy, oh boy, I mean, these folks are outdoing themselves. The amount of research and love and time that goes into upgrades all the time, and most of them, they happen, they do them, they don't announce them. They're going to announce some of these, but there are, to the best of my knowledge, very soon, there's new EMF mitigation upgrades that are coming. And we now can basically, our bodies are able to get much deeper sleep, relax even deeper than before, and have more energy and time to assimilate and to get used to these surroundings because of the EMF mitigation. So within the last 2 years, we have gone from bathing in a soup that was really, really, really bothering us in our bodies deeply. I remember right before we got in touch, or FLFE got in touch with us, Focused Life Force Energy, for those who've never heard of it, Focused Life Force Energy. Before they got in touch with us, in the months prior, Kristin and I were literally sending out prayers because we felt we needed help. We could sense the EMFs everywhere. We were very sensitive to it, and we could feel everything drain our body, and the usual things that used to help simply didn't any longer. And the first 2 days on the FLFE trial, on the Focused Life Force Energy trial, it was a massive relief event because I slept for the first time in a long time. I slept really well. I felt energized. And through the last years, this has been one of the greatest gifts of our lives. It's one of the best things we've ever done. There's few things that I feel about like that. But FLFE, for those who haven't heard of it, it's a spiritual quantum technology, and it maintains a high consciousness field at optimum levels around you or your home or an object of your choosing or your business. And what happens is that basically you live your life in a sacred site, in a sacred field. Your home becomes like a sacred pilgrimage site, if you will. Because what distinguishes a pilgrimage site or a sacred site from other places is that because of intense meditations over long periods of times and prayers, the field, the level of consciousness of a specific area went up and stayed up. And that's why people, when they go to certain places in the world, they receive healing or insights or spiritual experiences just by being physically in that field. And what our friends at FLFE have developed is a way to amplify these prayers and intentions and requests to divinity and direct them to a specific area so it can happen around your home, so it can happen around you and stay there. And within that field, everything becomes a little easier. Forgiveness, relationships, healing, I mean, the creations that come out of those fields, a lot of creative people live in an FLFE field now, and their creations are just so amplified. And I'm making a prediction here that within the next few years, when people move into a new home, they'll get their power turned on, they'll get their water turned on, they'll get their internet turned on, and they'll get their FLFE turned on. It will become a standard as this goes out to the masses. It will become something that is just part of your checklist when you move in or when you move. I think it's one of the most consequential things in the world today. So this has been such a blessing for so many. And I encourage you to check it all out. You can go to highconsciousnessfield.com, check out the information, go and read all the studies, the research that goes into it, how it affects plant life, plant growth, soil health. So many beautiful results with that. And give it a completely free trial. All right, no strings attached. You don't need a credit card. They're not going to accidentally create a subscription, anything like that. It's just a 15-day gift. Just try it out. It'll clear the negative energies of your property. It's absolutely incredible. So this is one of the greatest helpers, one of the greatest support systems for humanity at this time. I think it's a transitory system. I don't think we will need it forever. And I've said this to them. I said, when we do all of our jobs right, each and every one, FLFE won't be needed at some point. The Inspired show, the Inspired podcast won't be needed at some point, and we just won't be needed any longer. That's the goal. So, but for this transitioning time, I would encourage everyone to give it a try and experience it, feel it, and see if this is something that you would like to experience in your home, in your life. highconsciousnessfield.com. Just accept the gift that they're giving us. All right, friends, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for being with us. We love you. We appreciate you. And we will be back with you again very, very soon. Your environment shapes everything, your thoughts, your health, your energy. But most people never question the invisible field they live in. We did, and that's when FLFE found us. It's not a product, it's a field of pure life force energy that lifts everything it touches. We now live in it 24/7, and we would love to invite you to experience it too. Start your free 15-day trial now. No pressure, no strings attached. Just the truth, resonance, and peace.